Well, welcome to Journey. Hey, some of you, when you heard that part about me reading Linda's name tag, you were going to ditch your name tag by tomorrow morning, but now you're thinking I'm hanging on to that and making sure people can see it. Who knows what God can do, but that's the dating talk, which isn't tonight. Hey, I'm so excited to be sharing with you. Some of you are note takers, and in your little handout there for the Journey guidebook there's a page where you can take notes. And tonight I'm going to be speaking on God's complete forgiveness of you and me. But I realize in this room there's probably 150 freshmen who have never seen me before. I've been to I've been to all your campuses and spoken. But I'd like to just share my testimony briefly because you're getting to know me, some of you, for the very first time. So, grew up in an Italian family, 8 children. I'm the oldest boy, the 5th child, 4 girls born first and 4 boys. My family was very organized that way. So I'm an Italian in Chicago, and you think, what do I want to be growing up? If you're stereotypical, you're thinking mafia, and you're right. We would walk by one house in my neighborhood, and we'd whisper and go, and because we thought they probably were. And then when I was in 8th grade, I got a job in a bar. And when I was an 8th grader, I was doing 2 all-nighters a week, staying up and coming home at 4 or 5 in the morning when the bar closed. And in the bar was the most masculine men around. There was Phil the bartender, but Danny the bookie was mafia. And I was like, I think I could be Danny someday. I could stay up all night and talk about sports and collect money. I could do that job. And that's where I was headed. My mom was praying I'd be a priest. So I was torn all the time. Priest, mafia. Sophomore year in high school, it became clear to me. I had a revelation, probably not from God. But I was like, priests don't get married, mafia guys do. I'm going mafia. For my junior year of high school, I stole my first Bible, didn't know where you could find one in America, stole one out of a hotel room, and started reading and didn't understand it. So then I decided I'd go to church, but I didn't really understand church, so I opened up the yellow pages and saw pages and pages of church names. I decided the only thing to do was to go to every single church in the phone book in alphabetical order. So I started at A, they called and said, can you wear jeans? They said, sure, come as you are, and so I did. And I walked in, and people were raising their hands a lot. And so the first thing the pastor said is, how many of you believe God can answer prayer? Everyone raised their hand, and I think I believe that, so I raised my hand in unison with them. And he said, well, how many of you need an answer to prayer? Everyone, again, unanimous, in unity, raised their hand and said, yep, I need an answer to prayer. Then he gave a message, and at the very end, he said, would everyone here bow your heads and close your eyes? So I looked around to make sure what people I could see around did that, and they did. So I bowed my head, closed my eyes. He said, would anyone here like to receive Jesus Christ into their heart? And I thought, well, they're all going to want to do that. So in unison with everyone, I raised my hand. And he said, would the person who raised their hand please come forward? And I'm thinking, that's singular. I looked up, it was just me. And I thought, I think I volunteered to just talk about the Bible I just stole. And so I pulled down my hand and pretended they were singing a song, and I was like, yeah, who raised their hand? This bodybuilder stood up, and the second he stood up, I realized he broke the rules, because remember, we were supposed to have our eyes closed. Started walking towards me. Came up to my row, leaned over some people, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, hey, Bubba, can I share some verses out of the Bible with you? And I thought, you can do whatever you like. We walked to the front, the service ended, he shared Christ with me, and I'm face to face now with one of the most masculine men. Remember, I'm drawn to that. My parents are divorced. I'm looking for a guy like this. And in my very first church in the phone book, God picked the church, picked the phone book, and sent this guy to say, let me tell you about Jesus. I just became a Christian a year ago. You should do the same. All right, let's do it. Prayed with me, and I became a Christian at 16. Then he started meeting with me. He was dating Miss Missouri for the Miss America pageant. You know, he's a bodybuilder. And he started having quiet times with me before school. Driving to school, we'd memorize the topical memory system. He'd take me out, and he'd bring me on his dates with Lisa. And I'm sure she was like, oh, good, Jim's here again. You know, I was probably a real highlight for her. So, but somewhere in there, you know, the thing that amazed me is that I realized that if anybody in my high school, how is it that God would let me be a Christian? Like, I would have picked me last. And yet God in his mercy just reached out. And I want to reach out to you tonight. I want to be a vessel and just let God use my voice to you. And say, have you accepted God's complete forgiveness? Now, I realize most of you are saying, I'm a Christian. I realize many, many Christians are living in performance and works, hoping that God will forgive them, hoping they'll earn God's love, but that's not how God wants you to live. And so what I want to do tonight is talk to you about God's forgiveness of you. Nelson, what do you think is the biggest question you're asking right now? I think a lot of you are trying to figure out, am I in the right major? Where will I live after college? Who will I marry? What name tag should I read this weekend? On a keyboard, I think what represents your life the most right now is the question mark. You're asking so many questions. But I want to tell you what I think is the most important question you could ever ask. And that's, what's God's true identity? Who is he really? Because you'll never know your true identity unless you know God's. He's our creator. One thing I worry about is, are you like the name of this movie? Is this your identity? This show won the Oscar for the Best Picture Award in 1992. You weren't even born. And it was called Unforgiven. And in the whole movie, no one's forgiven. And I wonder if some of you right now would say, that's my name. I don't want anyone to know my name, but that's me. Before God, I am unforgiven. God knows all my sin, so how could he forgive? Or is your identity forgiven? The question I want to ask you is, are you going to spend your whole life earning God's love or receiving his love? Because I think everything starts with God's love for you, not your love for God. Could this be the conference where your whole life changes at this moment? From the whole beginning of your way you view God is his love for you. See, how are you going to wake up every day? Are you going to wake up every day living in the joy of God's complete forgiveness, or the burden, the crushing burden of, I hope God's not too mad at me? That's horrible. Will your motivation be joy and gratitude because of Jesus, you're fully forgiven? Or will you be doing the opposite, saying, I hope I can earn a little bit of God's approval today. Hope my quiet time made God happy. How can you be drawn to God for a lifetime unless you believe God's drawn to you? Let's read this next verse. In Jeremiah 31:3 it says, I have loved you, my people, with an everlasting love. With unfailing love, I have drawn you to myself. Now, I look around and I realize some of you are burdened right now with things that you've never told anyone. And some of you believe that God will easily forgive the people in this room around you, but not you. And I actually think there's some of you, and this would be normal, that you would think, I don't think I need much forgiveness. I don't really sin that much. You thought of a swear word once, but you didn't say it. But the truth is, you needed Jesus to die on the cross for you, or you would have faced eternity without him. We all need his complete and full forgiveness. So here's my simple outline for those of you who are note takers. God completely forgives you. Receive his complete forgiveness. Now, I want to ask you guys, would you come into my life and let me tell you a little bit about my brokenness, and let me just start the conference with transparency. And I hope it helps you. If I could just open my soul to you, maybe it'll help your soul open to God. So Linda and I and the boys moved out here in 1999, and it was just so exciting what God was doing, opening each campus and seeing it was all the Lord, all the Lord. But about 4 years in, after all the campuses were kind of up and running, and I had to make some hard decisions, I had to move some staff out, and there were hard things that I faced, and something felt broken inside of me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. All I knew is 100 quiet times was not going to fix it. Because I had tried. It wasn't fixing it. One day I was reading, actually the NAPS gave me a 6-month sabbatical. I told my boss, I said, I've never done that before or since, but I said, I need something. And I think it saved my life. And then I just started reading the Gospels. And I came to Mark chapter 10, and I read this passage about Jesus and a blind man named Bartimaeus. Crowds crossing, Jesus is in the crowd, and Bartimaeus hears it, and he shouts out. And a lot of you know I've had vocal cord damage, and I really, literally, I can't shout. I can't get past, like a 1 to 10, I can't get past 4, which is a good thing for a family. But in this message, I'll pretend, okay? So they're going by, and the blind man, it says, he shouts, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. So then it says, many of the people, it says, they yell. There's a lot of rudeness going on here, and it says, they yell, be quiet. So the blind man, it says, shouted louder, Son of David, have mercy on me. So Jesus stops and says to the crowd around him, it says, tell him to come here. And now the same crowd that was being mean to the blind man is nice and says, cheer up. Come on, he's calling you. I'm reading this passage, and I'm thinking, what? I think I've read the Bible before, but I don't know what Jesus is going to say. I'm like, the suspense. Now here's where you're going to hear my brokenness, okay? So I just started guessing ahead. And when I tell you this, you're going to say, well, he's a broken Christian. And I thought Jesus was going to say, this is so broken. Blind man was going to come up, and it was going to be me. And I was going to face Jesus, and Jesus was going to say, so what have you done for me? What have you, Jim, done for me? Probably won't add up to that much, but I thought that's what Jesus is going to say. Isn't that broken? And then I thought, well, what if he asked the blind man that? What had he done for Jesus? Had he given any money? Had he had a quiet time? He wasn't reading the Bible. Had he memorized any? Had he done anything spiritual? He was going to get a 0, and kind of like how I felt. Then I wondered if this was what Jesus is going to say, and this is broken. But I think some of you might feel this with me. I thought he was going to say, what do you, Jim, what can you do for me? And when are you going to get it done? And I was like, Jesus, I'm not doing much and I'm not getting it done. And then I read this passage and I was like, well, what did Jesus say? And he said, what do you, to the blind man, want me to do for you? And what I'm wondering is tonight, is that what Jesus wants to say to you? What do you want me, Jesus, to do for you? And you came to this conference thinking, what will I do for Jesus? And what if this whole conference was about Jesus doing something for you? Because at that moment in my life, Jesus said, you know what, Jim, what I'm saying to you is, what do you want me to do for you? And I was like, Jesus, I thought it was all about me doing for you. And he said, it's your whole relationship with me is upside down. It's broken. I think God came into my heart that needed repair and said, what do you, Jim, want me, Jesus, to do for you, Jim? And I'd like you to take a moment and just say quietly to Jesus, let him ask you that question. What do you, and then he says your name, want me, Jesus, to do for you? And then he says your name. Can I tell you what breaks my heart a little bit as the Rocky Mountain Regional Leader? And is that, I think a lot of my Christian life I've been so excited about doing something for God, that is still a good thing. I'm not saying it's not. And I've been so focused on other people doing something for God that I forgot to focus first on helping people be excited about what God did for them. And I am sorry. Could this be the conference where the Rocky Mountain region where we just turn? And you guys hear my brokenness and my sorrow and my joy that God forgives me. And that your motivation and mine changes, that this is the night. I want to dedicate the rest of my life to first telling people about what God's done for them before I say what you should do for God. I'm going to give 2 more messages where I'm going to say how exciting it'd be to share Christ with Jesus and make disciples. But not unless you first feel loved by God. By the way, I've been thinking about something someone said to me recently, like about a year ago. Okay, they said, the NAVs are about spiritual disciplines. When they said that, honestly, I've been thinking about that since. And it's been almost a year. And I've been thinking, you know what I used to say when people would say that? I'd go, yeah, yeah, you bet we are. And by the way, I will never apologize that we're about spiritual disciplines. Let's see, we help people get time with God. That's wonderful. I will never apologize. I think we should be. But here's what's been gnawing at me. Why didn't he say the NABS is about God's love? Why didn't he say, God, when I'm around the navigators, I sense the Lord. I sense Jesus' love for me. And I thought, part of it's me, I'm blocking. And I just feel like tonight, God's given me a chance to say, Jesus loves you, and he forgives you. And he forgave me, and if he forgave me, he can forgive you. Our motto is to know Christ and to make him known. Let's start with to know Christ's love. Well, what happened in the rest of the story with Bartimaeus? You need to know the rest. Bartimaeus says, Lord, I want to see. And Jesus heals him. Now let's come back to you and me. I've never struggled with the thought of my salvation is based on God's complete forgiveness. It's all God's grace. I've never thought I could earn part of that once I became a Christian. But I was basing every other part of my Christian life on me earning God's love. Salvation, that's God's love. Everything else, I'm going to earn. And God was saying, it's all God's love. Where are you? It was draining me. I could not live the rest of my Christian life like that. And I want tonight to be the night you are set free. And you say, it's God's love. It's his love. The next quiet time I have, I'm not going to earn anything. I am just going to praise him for loving me. Here's a beginning truth none of us will ever outgrow. We love because he first loved us. Now listen, the Navs, I don't know how we do this, but we attract doers. Like when we do our freshmen, at every one of your campuses, you have a way to reach out to freshmen. We don't put on the sign, please, overachievers only. But that's what we get. You're this whole room, you're like a whole room of overachievers, and you're like, you love to do. And that's me too. And in the Navs, we have things you can do. You could have quiet times. You could have scripture memory. You could have a prayer journal. You could have lots of pages on a prayer journal. You could have Joshua teams. There's lots of things you could do in Joshua team. You could be on a student leadership. You could do. And all those things could be wonderful if the motivation was right. But if you're doing them to earn God's love and not living out of his complete forgiveness, it will drain you. What had the blind man done to earn God's love? Nothing. Jesus just showed him mercy and love. What had I done to become a Christian? Nothing. I want you to live in the joy of God's love and his forgiveness for you. Now I want to tell you first of all, it's good for you to know how a speaker feels about you. I am blown away by your generation. I tell people all the time what I see God doing in your generation. I say the number one way I see you, this is how I summarize you. You are raising your hands to God and saying yes. And when you worship, it's so beautiful. So when I say a concern for you, you have to realize I'm committed to you. And you're safe when I say it. But the concern I have for your generation is shame. I think you're a generation that struggles with shame. Now, shame is different than embarrassment. Shame is a feeling that since God fully knows me, he must reject me. He must dislike me. And of course, he can't use me. I was on a plane headed from Denver to Dallas, and I was working on a message on sex, dating, and marriage. And there were 4 college students sitting behind me, 2 guys and 2 girls, and we started talking, and they said, so what are you working on? And, I don't know why I tend to be awkward, but instead of saying dating, I said sex. So it was just like an awkward moment. Sometimes I feel like my whole life is a bunch of awkward moments just strung together. Poor Linda has to walk through something. She's like, oh. But I digress from where I was going. So one of the guys said to me, well, you want to know what my youth pastor says about sex? I said, yeah, actually, I would like to hear it. And here's what he said. And when he said it, I wrote it down, and I'm going to tell you. And here it is. Sex took me farther than I wanted to go. Sex made me stay longer than I wanted to stay. Sex made me pay more than I wanted to pay. And for some of you, each statement or one statement is true. And you feel shame. Your innocence, I feel like you're a generation that's innocence lost. Now listen, when I was growing up, TV and movies were different. Now I'm not saying we didn't know how to sin. We really did. Food had not yet been invented, but we knew sin. Here's an example of a TV show I watched when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, something like that. It's about a astronaut who lands as he's re-entering the orbit, he lands on a desert island, and while he's waiting to be rescued, he finds a bottle, opens it, and a genie pops out. And what a happy coincidence, her name happens to be Jeannie. And the debate about this show was, will you ever see Jeannie's belly button? And the answer was no. So we never saw her belly button. But you have seen a lot more than belly buttons, and you feel shame. And it's overwhelmed you, what you've seen. And it's robbed you of your innocence, and you can't feel clean apart from God's complete forgiveness. And I want you to, and God wants you to. When he died on the cross, he knew everything you and I would do. And he still said, I will. You know, the oldest navigator alive right now is Jim Downing. He's 103 years old. And when he was 80 years old, I heard a message from him on how to walk with God at age 80. And I was so excited to hear it. And he shared his first point. And remember I told you in my brokenness led to this response. So here was his first point. Believe that God completely forgives you. I was so disappointed. I was wanting him to say, memorize this, or do this, or read these 2 books of the Bible, or 100 push-ups, or something. 23 years later, I can't agree more. He was right then. Because the truth is, all of us will continue to sin. And we'll all need to live in God's forgiveness now and the rest of our lives. And I want this conference to be where you make that decision. I want you to live in this verse from Isaiah. Now your guilt is removed and your sins are forgiven. Let's look at the story of the prodigal son just for a minute. Now, can I just tell you, in Luke 15, the reason the story of the prodigal son is happening, there's 3 stories that the Pharisees are criticizing Jesus for. Why is he hanging out with sinners? And Jesus gives mostly an emotional response that really, truly, if you need, I would love for you to enjoy Luke 15 by saying, what is God's emotions about forgiveness? And he tells 3 stories, and his third story is about a son who leaves his father and ends up in shame. And he, in his brokenness and in his shame, he somehow decides, I'll go back to my father. But he writes a speech, and here's his speech he writes. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And some of you feel that way right now. I never was worthy. If Jim really knew me, he'd know. But God does know me, so I'm not worthy. So this is the speech he prepares. This is shame. Now we'll see how the father responds. And he arose, the son, and came to his father. When he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. Now, I think the reason it says great way off his father saw him, because I think the father was looking. He was standing at whatever road and just saying, where's my son? And it says he had compassion when he saw him, and he ran. Well, that's not real dignified for an older man. I don't think he cared about dignity. I think he cared about his son. And he fell on his neck and kissed him. Will you let God do that for you tonight? Would you let him run to you and fall on your neck and kiss you and embrace you? That's our God. And that's what many of you need tonight. For God to hold you and say, I forgive you. The son tried to practice his speech and the father wouldn't hear it. He doesn't want your speech. He wants to embrace you, fall on your neck, and kiss you and say, you are my child. Now, here's what I believe many of us do instead of receiving God's forgiveness. We go to the penalty box. Now, I didn't grow up playing hockey, but I have watched it. And in hockey, if you're mean and nasty, you end up in the penalty box. And if you get put in the penalty box, the main thing, usually it's like 2 minutes long. You're out of the game, and your teammates have to fend without you. But the main thing is, you better not be having any happy thoughts when you're in the penalty box, because what if the cameras goes on you? You better not be checking Facebook or thinking about a joke, or you better look really sad, and you better be sorry to be in the penalty box. And I think many of us end up in the penalty box. We sin and go, man, I better just let God know how terribly sorry I am for about 2 days. I better just live down. Some of you right now are here at this conference and you're living down because you're letting God know how sorry you are. But I want you to know your sorrow won't earn God's forgiveness. Jesus earns your forgiveness. Come out of the penalty box immediately and accept his complete embrace of you. You are his son. You are his daughter. But what if I've done the same sin 1,000 times? Then sing to Jesus that he'll forgive you again and again and again. Sing to him. And live in his forgiveness. Now, I have memorized a couple verses on forgiveness just because I want God's word fresh for me when I sin and just live in his forgiveness. Let me just share a couple that I claim. And they're all from the Lord. I will forgive their wickedness and will never again remember their sins. Never again. You may bring it up, you may think about it, but not Jesus. 1 John 1:9, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Isaiah 1:18, though your sins are like scarlet, I will make them white as snow. Listen, you guys, with us being around the mountains, all of us know what new snow is like, how bright white. You got to put on sunglasses. It's so bright. Like freshly fallen snow. That's how he'll make you and me. I awake to this verse often. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Hebrews 10:17, and I won't remember their sins anymore. He chooses not to remember your sins. One of my verses I most frequently think about is when Jesus after his resurrection, he appeared to disciples at different times. And he had appeared to the disciples, and Thomas, one of the 11 remaining disciples, was not in the room. And he had said, I won't believe unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers in them, and place my hand into the wound in his side. 8 days later, the disciples are together. Jesus appears, and he says to Thomas, put your finger here and look at my hands. And so many times I'm praying and I'm saying, God, I'm sorry for my sins. He said, look, is this enough? And I go, it is, Lord. Praise you. And I receive his forgiveness immediately. And I focus on praising him instead of my sorrow. Will you look at his hands? So here's a truth that I want you to understand. You can't bring God's forgiveness to others if you've not received God's forgiveness for you. I want this conference to be a turning point in your life where you say, the rest of my life I'm going to be based out of gratitude to God for his love. I'm not going to earn anything else. He died on the cross. It's settled. He'll always forgive me. Always. You won't commit a sin from now to his return or your death that he doesn't already know about. And he will completely forgive. Doesn't that melt your heart? You know, in the book of Isaiah, Isaiah was going through shame. He saw the Lord and he said, it's all over. I'm doomed, for I am a sinful man, which is how some of you feel tonight. But then the Lord speaks to him and says, now your guilt is removed and your sins are forgiven. That's what I want for you tonight. And then he says, here am I, send me. So when we talk tomorrow night and Sunday morning about how God could send you, we got to settle this right now, where we're coming from. Out of God's forgiveness only. No duty. Just a response of gratitude and joy. God completely forgives you. Will you receive his complete forgiveness? Now listen, I realize in a room this size, there's some of you that you have never received Jesus Christ into your heart. You're like me at that church. You're not exactly sure how you got there. And you didn't steal anything, but you're here and you're thinking, I don't think I've ever received God's forgiveness ever. And it is so simple and so beautiful to just say, Jesus, please come into my heart. I open the door. Will you come in and forgive me? And he'll never, ever leave. And what I'd like to do is ask you, my phone number's on the next screen here. You need to tell somebody. I think you should tell the friend you came with. I think you should tell the Navigator staff at your campus. They'd want to rejoice with you. But I'd want to know it. Maybe you'd want to start with a text. And there's my number. You say, tonight I asked Jesus in. And I promise you, you ask, he'll answer. Now listen, tonight I just want to ask you, would you take a moment just to say, I'm just going to let it be quiet. Would you say, God, what response, Lord, do you want from me? What is the Lord saying to you? Not forget me, forget slides. What's the Lord saying to you? Is he saying, let me just fall on your neck and embrace you and forgive you completely? And I'd like to give you a minute of quiet. And then in a minute I'm going to talk again and I'm going to ask you, would you turn and talk to your friends right there and say, here's what I hear the Lord saying to me. And then I'll give you a couple minutes to talk. But for a minute, let's just reflect. All right, well, can you share with your friends, just talk for a minute and say, here's what I hear God saying to me tonight. And I'll let you talk for a couple minutes and I'll close in prayer in a couple minutes.
Heavenly Heavenly Father, you always amaze me. Let your kingdom come in my world and in my life. Give me the food I need to live through the day, and forgive me as I forgive the people that wrong me. Lead me far from temptation, deliver me from the evil one. I look out the window, the birds are composing. Not a note is out of tune or out of place. I walk to the meadow and stare at the flowers that are dressed than any girl on her wedding day. So why should I worry? Why do I freak out? God knows what I need. You know what I need. Your love is, your love is, your love is strong. Your love is, your love is, your love is strong. The heavens is now advancing. Invade my heart, invade this broken town. The kingdom of the heavens is buried treasure. Would you sell yourself to buy the one you found?
Sorry. Hey, can I just take a minute and pray and just thank God for his forgiveness. But listen, please keep dialoguing over this. I want it to change your life. I want it to be a way you sense God's love. I'll pray. Jesus, you died on the cross. You forgave every one of us. You knew everything we do, and you still died and rose again. We praise you. Lord, I just want to ask, will you walk this audience right now? Will you do every single row, every single person? Don't miss a person. I know you wouldn't. And would you speak to each person's heart about your complete love, your absolute forgiveness? And would it mark all of us? Would it change us the rest of our lives? And would it lead to so much praise for your name? Be lifted up, Lord. In Christ's name, amen.
So growing up, my family and I were relatively shy. We kind of never grew up talking about religion or politics, so I never really cared for God or politics either, or even religion. It was just something we didn't talk about as a family. When we did talk about it, we would just kind of let it go and just talk about other things, about how our day was going or anything else besides that. So I never had an intention of getting to know those topics at all. Life at high school was fantastic, while life at home was not so great. Life at home was different. My mom was abusing all kinds of drugs at that time, and just in and out of rehab, emotionally and physically, just not really present. My dad was an alcoholic and rarely home, And that was super hard and frustrating just to be part of and to live in that. It got to the point where I got super frustrated and I started drinking down my problems, and I started doing drugs and trying out all the different things that led me just really astray, that just didn't really help me. What I thought would be happiness ended up being completely emptiness, and so I was ready for a change. Coming to UNC, I was ready for a change, but that didn't really happen right away. I fell back into the party scene, drinking and doing different drugs again, and it got really bad to the point where one day I didn't know who I was or where I was, and at that time a complete stranger was at the right time at the right place and just took me home back to my dorm and left me a note with her phone number because I had no idea what had gone the night before, and it was by the grace of God that I had woken up that day. Once we